Who's the person you're being? Are you satisfied? Welcome to Be the Person, a podcast for the brave and the curious, for people ready to explore their true potential. I'm your host, Annie Randall. Join me and let's get ready to go on this journey together. Today, I have a special episode for you. It's simple steps to ideal health. And we're going to talk in three areas. We're really going to talk movement, nutrition, and mindfulness. And I'm excited to share this with you today. It's the beginning of 2025. And I was thinking back to last year, January 2nd of 2024, I had to get an MRI for my hip. I had my labrum replaced a few years ago and was still having a bunch of issues and went in to have an MRI. Ended up really struggling with vertigo. That was something I struggled with a lot last year and kind of had a panic attack. Came out of the MRI and made it, but just was crying. And my daughter Allie and Jeff had to come pick me up. So I was really down and frustrated on where I was starting from my health journey at the beginning of 2024. So maybe you're starting 2025 not where you had intended, and that's okay. We all have a starting point and we build from there. Maybe you have a great health routine right now and you just want to make some little tweaks. I think this presentation will really help you in doing that. Either way, whether you have big changes or little changes you want to make, let's jump in. And if you're following along, if you're listening, there is this presentation with slides on YouTube, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes so you can see the slides as well. But a little bit about my journey. I own 3 Orangetheory fitness locations in Colorado Springs, but I really started with a business background. My undergrad is in economics and I have my MBA. But when we started these locations for Orangetheory 11 years ago, I really wanted to be able to do every position within the studio. So I got NASM certified and I started coaching Orangetheory and did that for a couple of years. And then about 2 years ago, my son had a lot of stomach issues and I was doing a ton of research. We were trying lots of things and I really got into holistic nutrition. So I became certified there as well. And then in 2024, I found out in that MRI I had a torn hamstring. So I couldn't work out for the first 3 months. And during that time, I started a mindfulness and meditation practice because up until then, working out was simply the way I had always dealt with stress. But I felt like I was supposed to learn something new. And mindfulness and meditation is what came from that. And that's where I want to start today is with mindfulness. But before we do that, I just want to acknowledge how difficult this journey can be to be healthy. There is so much information out there. I feel like it can be really the land of confusion. And today, my goal is to really make it simple for you. It's not going to be an easy journey, but what if it could be easier than you thought? What if you could take out some of that noise and just have a plan that was simple? But really, don't mistake simple for easy. And you have to think back. If you do what you've always done, you're really going to get the same results. So I would just challenge you today to stay curious with me for the next few minutes. And the reason I point that out is because of an example that really happened to me last year. I was suffering with acne and I went to see somebody and she was said, tell me about your skincare routine. And I said, oh yeah, I have all the products and this is what I do. And I'm happy with those. And she kind of laughed and she just said, Annie, you have all the products, but yet they're not doing what you need them to do. And she was very blunt about it, and I really appreciated that because honestly, sometimes we get in a routine or we get stuck in a rut and we don't even realize what we're doing isn't working. So maybe you have a home gym and you haven't touched it for several months, or you have a Peloton that hasn't been turned on, or you have a gym membership and haven't gone. I'm just going to ask you to stay curious on all aspects of mindfulness, movement, and nutrition as we go through this today. One thing is, we all have choices. Every day, we make choices that make our bodies stronger or weaker. We have the ability to change all the cells in our body. But in order to make those right choices, we really have to get it right in our mind first. If we don't get it right in our mind, we'll never make the right choice. And that's what a mindfulness practice is. It's slowing down enough to uncover, why do you do the things you do? Let me give you an example. Have you ever ended up with a carton of ice cream that's empty or a bag of potato chips that's empty, sitting on the couch watching TV? And you're like, wait a minute, what just happened? And how did I eat that entire thing? I think it's happened to all of us before. And mindfulness is just really saying, okay, what happened? There was probably some event that may have triggered you to do that. Your subconscious mind is so powerful, and it goes to what it's comfortable with. But once you recognize the trigger of what happened to make you sit on that couch to eat that ice cream, maybe you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend. Maybe you got in an argument with your spouse. Maybe one of your kids was late. Who knows what it is? But once you recognize that trigger that made you do the behavior you want to change, you can actually change it. Recognition is really key here. And this is for whatever bad habit you're working on. And we all have them, whether it's eating too much, skipping workouts, drinking too much, being angry, shopping. Pick your bad habit, but recognize what triggers you to do that. And then be conscious to think, what could I do instead? So instead of grabbing the ice cream, it might be the walk around the block, call the friend, do whatever. But I think it's really, really important to start to recognize, what behavior is it that you want to change? And then what typically triggers you to do that behavior? Mindfulness, again, is just slowing down enough to recognize, yes, I can make this change. And I want you to do a quick mindfulness practice with me. If you're not driving, I want you to close your eyes. If you're driving, keep them open. But I want you to really think about, what is one habit in 2025 or whenever you're listening to this that you know you need to change. You either need to stop doing something or you need to start doing something. And you probably, something comes to mind, like, you know the one thing that will really impact your health this year, and it comes to mind. Now I want you to envision your future as if this change has already happened. What happens? What do you see when you make this change? And then I want you to think about, how do you feel when you make that change? What comes up for you? Picture yourself in that situation where you're no longer doing the bad habit, or you started doing the thing that you need to do. What is that feeling inside of your body? And then lastly, I just want you to think about, is there something that you need to let go of in order for this to happen? Whether it's a feeling, a belief, a relationship, whatever that is, you need to let go of that. And now I just want you to take a big deep breath. And if you had your eyes closed, open them back up. You may want to hit pause here and just write this down. If you're not in a place to write it down, that's okay too. We can just keep going. But I want you to take that with you, because that exercise is really important. The next thing we're going to talk about is movement. And I feel like right now there is so much noise out there on, what kind of workout, how long should I work out? Should I do cardio, strength training? How hard should I do it? And the answers really come down to, a lot of it, what works for you, what makes you feel good, and then does it meet the guidelines and can you be consistent with it? So let's break that down. What are the guidelines for exercise? There are 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise per week. And to answer, do you need strength training or cardio? The answer is really you need both. It's really important. There's been a big push towards strength training this past year. And I agree, muscle is the key to longevity. You absolutely should be strength training because if we don't use our muscles, we will lose them. It's 1% a year over if you're over 35. It's 2% a year if you're over 60 and you're not doing some kind of resistance training. So I think that is key to have it in your practice. But cardio is also important because the number one killer of Americans, both men and women in the US and really around the world, is heart disease. So you have to work your heart in order to have a healthy heart. You may have a practice right now, a workout routine that really works great for you, and you are getting the results you need. And I love that for you. I would say keep doing it. But about 13 years ago, I fell in love with Orangetheory. And again, we own three of them. And some people think it's a smoothie shop, but really it's group personal training. And the reason I fell in love with it because it was heart rate based. You could see in real time your actual heart rate. All of the workouts were tested by science, led by a coach, and tracked by technology. So it really is a fantastic workout that includes both cardio and strength training. And we really are around to help people live longer, more vibrant lives. At Orange Theory, the biggest muscle that we work is muscle you can't see, and that's your heart. Because again, there is definitely a strength component with Orange Theory, but there's also a cardio component. The thing that I love the most is you don't have to worry about keeping up with your neighbor. Because isn't that a thing with group fitness classes? You're like, if you go to Body Pump or something like that, or a different strength training class, you're like, am I keeping up with them? It's how a lot of people end up getting hurt in group fitness. And the one thing about Orange Theory, it goes off your own personal heart rate, and you don't have to keep up with your neighbor. So whether you're just beginning your fitness routine or you're an elite athlete, it can be a really great workout. And again, 30 million Americans have heart disease right now. So it is really, really important that you do work your heart. I think back when I was growing up, working out was really like you did it. I remember anyway, because you wanted to look a certain way. Like you wanted to be skinny or you wanted to have muscle tone. And although those things can be great benefits of working out, there's so much more to it than that. We know now your health and lifespan depends on it. Like, how do you want to be and move when you're 75, 85? We are living longer and longer, or we have the ability to now, but we want to live those last years of our lives really vibrantly. And exercise is going to be key to doing that. The great news is you don't have to do it for hours and hours a day, especially when we're thinking about Orange Theory or a similar type workout. 2 to 4 times a week is really what is recommended for heart health and to add years to your life. So I would just encourage you to think about if you're listening to this in January of 2025, what do you want to do for your workouts? Maybe you've never tried Orange Theory or group fitness. I know that was Jeff when I told him, gosh, 11 years ago, I wanted to go try Orange Theory. He just laughed and said, that's for girls, and I don't do group fitness. He went, and the whole story is we own Orange Theory really because of him. He wanted to own it after that very first class. So I would invite you this year, just stay curious. Think about trying something new. But whatever you do, consistency is key. You have to do it not only in January, but all year long. What is something you like to do that you can be consistent at? And then when will you do it? What gets scheduled gets done. I am a huge believer in that. All of my workouts go on my calendar every week, just like a meeting, because if they don't, they won't get done. Something else comes up. I'm busy and so are you. But you know what? It's really important to take care of your own health first. So those go on the calendar. When will you work out? What will you do for your workout? And then keep those appointments to yourself. You're important and you're worth it. Now, I'd like to skip over and talk a little bit about nutrition. And this is always one where I feel like a lot of people have a ton of questions. And at least I was brought up with just calories, calories, calories. But it's more than calories in, calories out. If that's all it was, we wouldn't have a pandemic or a pandemic of really obesity in the US. So calories do matter. They absolutely do. But macronutrients matter too, like proteins, carbs, fats. We know that not all things are created equally, not all calories. If you eat a Snickers bar, it's not the same as eating 200 calories worth of broccoli. They're different, so it matters. Timing also matters, and then your hormones matter. Now, today I'm only going to touch on two hormones. I'm going to touch on insulin and cortisol, but obviously, your other hormones like testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, those matter as well, and you would want to get them tested by a doctor. But before we jump into all of that, let's talk because a lot of people just go on a diet. And let's talk about what really happens when we do go on a diet. We all have a basal metabolic rate. It's called BMR. And at Orangetheory, we have a machine called an InBody that will measure your BMR. For example, mine is around 1,300 calories. And what that means is if I simply did nothing all day long, my body would burn 1,300 calories. That's my metabolic rate. There's some things that really come up that play into your rate. Male or female, the amount of muscle versus fat you have, your age. But when you go on a diet, let's say I would go on a diet, I would start exercising, and I decide to cut my calories to 1,000 calories a day. My body is very smart and it will start to shift my metabolic rate down. And so it becomes harder and harder to lose weight as that happens. Do you feel like you need an adventure or a new challenge in 2025? Join Jeff and I on our Peru trip. We're going to do a one-day hike to Machu Picchu. It's always been on my bucket list, but it's becoming more and more restricted. So right now you can still walk around Machu Picchu, but I believe that won't be the case for long. We're also going to explore the Amazon jungle, the city of Lima, have the option to hike Rainbow Mountain. It's going to be a wonderful trip. It happens next September. See all the full details in the show notes. So instead of just going on a diet, there's some other things that I really want you to think about because timing matters when you eat your food. And you probably all heard of intermittent fasting. And there's more to it than just, you're probably familiar. The popular one is the 16-8, where you don't eat for 16 hours and you do eat for 8 hours. But there can be a lot more to it than that. And before we go there, let me just give you an example. I'm going to paint you a picture because I'm a picture person. I want you to think about a refrigerator and a freezer example. And we're going to come back to this example a couple of different times, but really, you have to burn all of the glycogen in your muscles and your liver in order to get to your fat cells. So, in my refrigerator freezer example, I have to eat through all of the things in my refrigerator before I can eat anything in my freezer. And my freezer represents the fat cells. The other thing that has to be true is your insulin levels really need to be low. So, two things to burn fat. One, you have to burn through, again, your glycogen stores in your muscles and your liver, and your insulin levels need to be low. We can achieve this with intermittent fasting because think about it, when you give your body that rest, it starts to burn all of that glycogen in your body, and your blood sugar and your insulin start to go down. There's a ton of different ways you can build an intermittent fasting plan. When I'm coaching people, one of the things that really we work on is a minimum of 12 hours of no eating at night. So for me, after dinner, my rule is I typically don't eat after dinner. So that ends at 7 o'clock. And at minimum, I don't eat until 7 the next morning. Because realistically, you guys, I'm not going to pick a piece of celery or a carrot. I'm not going to pick anything healthy for me if I'm sitting on my couch eating at night. And you're probably not going to either. So I would just encourage you 12 hours no eating at night. Not to say it can't ever be broken. Of course, there are days when it's somebody's birthday or we're out to dinner and it's later. That's okay. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. But what is your general rule? A lot of times, really, mine can be 14-10, and that feels great for my body. But just play around with this and see what will be the window that you want to eat in. If you're watching, I would just encourage you or your place that you could write it down. Write that down. The other thing is limit snacking in between meals. Like eat your meals and give your body that rest 3 to 4 hours in between. If you're looking at the pictures online, it really shows what happens to your insulin levels when this happens. And if you're just listening, I'm going to paint a picture for you. Because in our first example, where we don't eat for 12 hours at night and we take those breaks in between our meals, our blood sugar comes up, but then it comes down. And it goes up for lunch and comes down, goes up for dinner, and then dips pretty low at night. But in the example where I'm eating all of the time, my insulin level and blood sugar really never goes down all the way. It stays elevated. And even at night, it just gives a little dip. So we really need to give our body a break, let it burn through all of that glycogen, really, so we can access our fat storage cells. So timing can be really important. There's a couple other things that play into success with nutrition. The first one is high fructose corn syrup, and it's in a lot of processed foods. Some things you probably wouldn't even think about, like ketchup and a lot of salad dressing. But I want you to do this. I want you to start to read your labels. For me, I just have a rule. If there's high fructose corn syrup in there, we don't buy it. There's a study that was done, and if you ate an extra 1,000 calories per day of either glucose or fructose, the glucose group really didn't show a change in their insulin sensitivity, but the fructose group, the one that ate high fructose corn syrup, they showed a 25% worsening in their insulin levels after just 7 days. So, insulin levels, again, are really important. Your ability to bring them up and down in order to lose fat. So, it's key that you keep high fructose corn syrup out of your diet. The other thing is really reading labels for added sugar. And I would just encourage you to start doing this. The recommended daily allowance for sugar is going to be 36 grams for men and 25 grams for women and children. And I have two examples up online, and I'll tell you about them if you're listening. The first is a Kit Kat, and it has 22 grams of added sugar. The other one is a Gatorade. It has 48 grams of added sugar. So your beverages are a lot of times where you can get into trouble fast because you could easily drink a Coke, a Sprite, a Gatorade, and that's going to give you well over the amount of sugar you should intake in an entire day. So pay attention, especially to the added sugar. There's one other thing that comes up that makes it really hard to lose weight, but really to have optimal health. And that's regulating your cortisol. Now, cortisol gets a bad rap because it's called the stress hormone and it really mediates fight or flight in your body. Cortisol should be high in the morning and then decrease as the day goes on. And once cortisol is released into your body, glucose is available so you can provide energy to your cells. When that happens, your insulin goes up because it wants to push the glucose into your cells. And remember, if insulin is high, you can't lose fat. So what happens, let's say what used to happen is your cortisol would go up because maybe you saw a lion and you need to run fast from that lion. And so again, your glucose would go up, your insulin would go up, your muscles are ready to go, and you can run. But that's not what happens today. We're not running from lions. What happens today is you get a phone call to say that client is leaving the business, or your spouse did something, your kids are causing you stress, you lose your job, whatever it is, there there's no real lion, but something caused overall stress. And again, it raises cortisol, which raises insulin levels. If it happens once or twice, not a big deal, but it's the chronic high cortisol where you're under stress all of the time and the cortisol levels remain high that trigger the glucose levels to stay high. And then your insulin levels stay high. And that's where you really get into trouble because, again, you can't burn fat that way and your body's not working how it was meant to be. It's not supposed to be under that amount of stress. There were some studies that have come out to show, oh my gosh, if you hit train or you exercise, you're going to raise your cortisol levels. And although that is true, you do raise your cortisol levels during exercise, but then they will drop back down. And oftentimes they'll drop down to a lower level. So it can be very healthy. Cortisol isn't an issue when you exercise. The issue really becomes when you have chronic stress and chronic increased cortisol levels. So I want you to think about your overall stress. And maybe that's your thing this year that you really need to look at and change is how will you deal with stress? Maybe it is through exercise. Maybe it's through a mindfulness practice. Maybe you need a new job. Whatever it is, think about how can I have healthy cortisol levels? And then I always get the question, okay, so what should I eat? And there's a couple factors that play in here because there is a lot that can go into exactly what plan is great for you. But there's two pieces of advice that I think will change your health. And the first one is eat whole foods. Right now, the number one thing killing Americans is processed food, and it's ultra processed food. So when you look at that package of food and you flip it over, you don't recognize what the ingredients are in the label. It's different than if you eat packaged broccoli and the only thing in there is broccoli. That's processed, but it's not ultra processed. Ultra processed is the one that it's wreaking havoc on our health. And right now, 60% of the American diet is ultra processed foods. 70% of our kids is ultra processed. Right now, the American lifespan is decreasing, yet we're spending 2 times as much on our healthcare than the other top 12 nations. A lot of this has to do with what food are you putting in your body? Because food companies are not out there to make you healthy. And I think this is key to remember. Their number one job is to sell more products. They do that by putting a lot of ingredients in that make you more addicted, like high fructose corn syrup, and want to eat more. So, really reading your labels, understanding what is in your food, and then the added sugar to your food is super important. Whenever you can do whole foods, that's a really, really great choice. The other thing to focus on is really protein because it helps you feel full longer. It also takes more energy for our body to process protein. It takes between 20 and 25% of the calories you eat for your body just to break it down. And the other thing is, it's really hard to overeat. It's not like anyone goes for a third piece of salmon. Like when you're done eating protein, you're usually full. What is recommended, the RDA is actually very low for protein, but what you have to remember is that's just what's there to keep you alive. What I would recommend and what most health professionals would recommend is zero point 0.7 to 1 gram of ideal body weight per pound. So, for example, if your ideal body weight is 150 pounds, you would take zero point 0.7 times 150 to 1 gram. So around, I don't have my calculator with me, zero point 0.7 times 150, that up to 150 grams of protein. What I almost guarantee is if you're not paying attention to protein, you're under eating it. You really have to be intentional about protein if you're going to get to this level. It doesn't have to be challenging, but again, it has to be intentional. The other really important thing is setting yourself up for success and starting your day with a minimum of 30 grams of protein. So for me in the morning, I do a protein shake and I add a scoop of collagen to it because that adds extra protein. So it gets me around 40 grams of protein because my goal per day is around 120 grams. If I can knock out 40 grams with just that one protein shake, that sets me up for success the rest of the day. So if you have to track one number as far as macros, protein is really the one I would suggest you focus on. Because when you get that one right, the rest start to fall into place. Now you may need to meet with a professional in order to get more help on your diet plan. And you can absolutely do that. These are some basic steps to help you move forward. And the last thing here is I want you to think about meal prep because we all struggle with decision fatigue. There is so much going on all of the time, so many decisions you're making day in and day out. And if when it comes to food, if there's a lot of noise for you, if you can just take the choice out and meal prep breakfast and lunch, they don't have to be hard or complicated. You can do this in an hour on Sunday. You can do breakfast and lunches. But I would just say, look, what meals am I going to prep and when am I going to do it? And that habit right there will set you up for success for the entire week. You're much, much more likely to be successful with your nutrition if you plan ahead of time. I know I gave you a lot of information today, and I just want to do a real quick summary. So, when you think about mindfulness, go back to that one habit. What was that one habit you need to add or take away? You really want to change. And then, how do you feel when that happens? And then maybe there's something you really need to let go of. I want you to think about what that would be. The second part, we talked movement. And again, you need to schedule your workouts. You're worth it, and they should include both cardio and strength training. And last, we talked about nutrition. Remember, you're going to really give your body a 12-hour break from food at night. That's minimum. You're going to start every day with protein, and you're going to try and get zero point 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per ideal body weight. And then focus on eating whole foods. How can you start to eliminate some of those processed foods? And a lot of that may come when you meal prep. So I hope this is helpful for you today. I hope you can take away something and know that your best year is yet to come. Some of these might be really small changes, and I encourage you to make them small. What can you do this week and continue to do next week and next month and all year? Because that's what's going to set you up for success. If this resonated with you, or there's somebody that you feel would benefit from it, please share this with them. It could change their overall health. And the podcast grows when you share the episodes. And always, it would mean the world if you would give it a 5-star review. Thanks for tuning in to Be the Person podcast.